So you can take the decision only if you have information. So that is where Cisco gives you the option of be connected anywhere. And also, we have now created unique solutions wherein the application no more restricted to a PC. For example, if I want to check for any processor, if I want to check for a delivery status, I no need have to be dependent upon a PC. I can get that information on my smartphone. So, which means I can take that decision based on that information anywhere. So that is where the power of communication comes into effect. So with this, I conclude my presentation. So you can ask any questions during the break time, and we have a local contact for for Cisco for all the thing. You can note down the contact. He is also available here. So with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would like to say Cisco's front-ending networking, embedded and programming solution across markets and even our homes. But in a very, very lighter vein, I'm still wondering if they can come up with a solution to bring down my wife's shopping bills. To Kumarapan, Senior Consultant with Cisco Systems. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a big round of applause.
Good evening, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here this evening with all of you. So, in fact, I was wondering what I would be asked to speak, and they just told me there's no topic. So, I had to think of a topic myself, and basically, I said, okay, will I talk about manufacturing or will I talk about something else? And I didn't think I'll be competent to talk about manufacturing because there'll be so many august speakers who talked about manufacturing. So I said, let's start with something different. The future, we have to make it as we want it. What do you mean by that? I mean, basically, we talked about manufacturing for the upturn in the economy. How does the economy turn up? How does the economy turn down? Or do we really know what India is in for? In fact, what we have seen in the last few years with our experience in Europe and also other parts of the world, we are like the Hanuman. We don't know our own strength. The Indian market tends to discount itself so badly, but everybody is looking at India. So let me just run through some of the ideas and why, what we're doing and how we're doing. Okay, this is what we call population graph. Any country, if you have any country in stage 1, you have very high death rates. Normally you start with the death rate. You don't start with the birth rate. So we have a very high death rate. So society normally tries to have more children than that to keep the population up. For instance, when India got independence, the death rate was 55 per thousand. And the average life expectancy of an Indian at independence was 27 years. That was the average life expectancy because you had a lot of child mortality. The British thought the hospitals were only where their cantonments were there or where the servants lived. Otherwise, you didn't have hospitals anywhere except major cities or major centers where the British were there. So you had a lot of childbirth, so the life expectancy was 27 years only. Then after we got independence, let's say we start talking about any country which develops, first thing what drops is the death rate. Because you have better hospitals, you have better facilities, so it's very easy to control the death rate. The death rate drops drastically. And then the birth rate follows because the society doesn't still believe, you are comfortable having 5 children, you are comfortable having more than 4 children. And you believe the reason why you had 4 to 5 children was that you didn't expect more than 1 or 2 to survive to support you in your old age. So that mental makeup takes some more time for it to change. Then the population starts going down. That is what you call stage 3 actually. Population starts coming down. Then stage 4 is also, it goes down. And then when you are getting into stage 5 is when the population growth is below the death rate. So you're actually below replacement. We talk about in, let's say, in statistics, or we talk about in population studies, replacement rate below or above. So as much as on the purple curve that you see is the total population. Okay, so as long as your population and the death were equal, the population also stayed stable. And when you improved your health facilities and your death rate went down, the population starts moving up. And then finally again it stabilizes. This is a normal cycle in any country through its developmental efforts. Whenever any country is developing, this is called a normal population curve. Okay. Now in India we have a very funny situation. You have Tamil Nadu and Kerala which are in stage 4. In fact, Tamil Nadu and Kerala today have a birth rate of only 17 per thousand, and our death rate is about 22 per thousand. From 55 in the British time, we have come down to 22, which is considered the replacement rate. Anything below 2.2 is basically a couple having 2.2 children giving for mortalities of some nature is basically replacement. So when Tamil Nadu is having 17 children per thousand, you are talking about below sustenance. So actually Tamil Nadu and Kerala in stage 4, and we have Bihar maybe in stage 1 or stage 2. You have, the Bimaru states, what we call Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, are all in stage 2, where you have the death rates dropping drastically, the population is really booming. So this is, background of population sciences. Now what relevance does this have with manufacturing or the markets? We'll just see. Okay, this is what we are called a less developed country. If you look at a less developed country, the population, this is called a population pyramid. In this pyramid, you have 0 to 4 as age group, as the largest group. And then you have, as you go on, and 80 plus is very minimal, because your age group is kind of, your longevity is not as good. And this is actual data as on 2009 for the world, for the less developed countries. As on 2009, this is the actual data for the world. So where you have, if you really see at this point, see the curve is like this, and then it turns this way. So which means there's a slowdown of population happening. Yeah, that's what I was asking for. See, if we, at this point, you're seeing actually a turn down of the, growth of population, which happens here. Until then, the population is growing, then it turns down. This is called, bottoming of the curve. You are basically having a maturing population. And this is the more developed countries. I mean, the world is classified into two worlds. One is less developed and more developed. And just look at this. The more developed countries, if you look at it, they have a population bandwidth of not more than about 50 million in any, maximum is about 50 million in any age group. Okay? And they are almost like a pillar like this. And if you look at this, 80, 60, 70, 80, you have more women than men. And everybody says women live longer than men. No, that's not the fact. Those are all the men who died in the Second World War. All the more developed countries were in the Second World War. The less developed countries were not in the Second World War. So they lost most of the men in the Second World War. So that's why you have very low men at the higher age group than the women. Now I'm just drilling down into one of the more developed countries, which is Germany. If you look at Germany again, they have a very low population of men who were all dead in the Second World War, because Second World War took place about 65 years back. 1945 was the close of the Second World War. So about 65 years back, so if somebody who was 20 years would be around 80s now. So anybody over 20 went to war and he was killed off in this particular thing. And you have the women, which was very large in that nation. Then, it's stabilized. Now what you're seeing is the babies which were born after the Second World War. These are called the baby boomers. And they're kind of getting into retirement age, and then they had less and less children. So the bottom, it's actually bottoming out. This is Germany. And let's take Japan. Japan in 1950s was something like this, as you call a LDC, less developed country. And Japan in 2007 went like this with a narrow bottom, 13.5% of the population below 20. And then it's expected to go in 2050 something like this. And what happens with a structure like this? It will fall down. Because the reason it will fall down is that you have people in this bracket, almost 40% of the people are above 60. They become strained on the infrastructure, the productivity is lower, and you have only 51% holding on the weight, and as it goes further, you don't have people coming in. So this becomes a negative growth for Japan. Okay, where are we going now? Okay, we talked about population, we talked about Europe, we talked about Germany and Japan. Now let's look at America. America also went through the same problem. They went through the Second World War, they had this whole mess. But they don't seem to have that major impact as another country. If you look at America, it's like a Coca-Cola bottle or something like that, almost all through. The reason is, America is a very porous country. The final destination of everybody is America. Every country wants to migrate to America. So even if the local population is aging, you have people who are going in there. And now, biggest problem that the Americans are having, last week there was an article which said America is turning Asiatic and Hispanic. 25% or 30% of children who are in schools today are Asiatic and Hispanic. So in 20 years' time, you could have an Indian president for America or a Mexican president for America. There are a lot of children that I know who are Indian descent who want to become president of America. That you could very well see a situation where you already have governor candidates. Right, you have Bobby Jindal, you have guys. So it will take another 20 years. You might have an Indian actually walking into the White House, which is as much symbolic as Obama being in the White House. And let's take a really less developed country like Angola, which is a pure pyramid. Okay, now the reason I've talked about all these pyramids, what are we saying? We talk about manufacture, we talked about what is the attractiveness of India, what is the challenge. We are scared of China. We are always scared of China, saying that China is going to defeat us. That is one story which has been told to us by everybody. China is more competitive than India. China is a great market. India can never compete with China. This has been the story which has been told to us. Now let's put on our manufacturing hats, compare India and China. This is China. Okay, now you look at China, there are two anomalies that we have in China. One is that the purple is much smaller than the blue. Okay, they've had this one-child policy, so they've been committing infanticide very selectively. So they've not had female children, or they've selectively reduced the female children, and they've had more male children. And as we go now, they're also starting to go like a developed country. Their base is getting smaller. China is aging very fast. So what they say, China is aging. Now you have in the 40s, and above 35, if you look at it, almost 50% of the population is falling in there. So China is an aging market. It's likely that they will go the way of Japan or the way of Germany in about 20 years. So we are seeing signs of this in the labor strikes, because what is happening today is this age group is coming to work. They are less than the number of people they are replacing. So there is a demand on workers, and this is a pampered generation. They've been pampered by 4 grandparents and 2 parents. So that is what we are seeing. And let's look at India. A beautiful pyramid. If you look at India, we are looking at very classic structure like what we saw, what is supposed to be. Your population is slowing down, and you have a very steady this thing. You don't have any kicks. You don't have imbalances. So which means next 40 to 60 years, we are going to have economic growth, which China is not going to have for 40 to 60 years. Japan certainly is not going to have. Europe is not going to have. But India will have the growth for the next 40 to 60 years, which means every man and child in the world will want to be in India to manufacture and to sell. Not only to manufacture, also to sell, because you have on top of this the best talent in terms of engineering skills, medical skills, accounting skills, human resources, management skills, everything, and entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is something which doesn't exist in other countries. In China, it doesn't exist. Exists here. So we have a phenomenal advantage, which I don't think any other country in the world has. And next 50 years, just you can relax. I mean, unless you do something really wrong, you're not going to have a problem in India for the next 50 years. I mean, if you are an average performer with an idea to grow, you will grow. So given this, the future is there. It's not any government policy. Forget any government. It's not anybody else's thinking or any other country's charity. It is going to be our own strength of our own demographics which is going to drive us. And that is already set in stone. I mean, it's not going to change today. Nobody can change this demographics as it stands today. So it is absolutely carved in stone. You have a very good advantage. And let's now talk about a survey. Young people facing the future. In 2008, there was a survey done by a French foundation of Polytechnic for Politics, and they talked about which country's youngsters are positive about future. Anybody would like to take a guess as who's ranked number 1? Which is the best country in the world as far as the youngsters are concerned? I think I spoiled my guess. Okay, that's number 1 by far is India. And this is a survey done by the French, not by us. Life as a whole, India ranks number 1. Family, India ranks number 3. Norway is number 1. Finland is number 2. Finances, India is number 1. Health, India is number 1. Work, India is number 1. Leisure time, India is number 1. Friends, India is number 1. General situation of the country, we are number 3. We are beaten by Norway and we are beaten by Finland again. So overall, India has 12 points and number 2 is Denmark, and our great friend China is in number 6. America is in number 11, and EU actually doesn't count because it has Germany and France already mentioned, so, and Italy and everybody is mentioned by this thing. So really, if you look at it, surveys are telling you we are number 1. And this is not anybody else. It's our own youngsters who believe that we have the best possible life ahead. So you don't really look at India as being a third world country anymore. You don't look at India as being a laggard. But what we need is, do we trust ourselves? Are we willing to drive ourselves? This is basically what we need to do. And manufacturing, technology, skills, everything is what's required right now to push that forward. And just, I mean, overall, he said, overall, India is number 1. I mean, everybody acknowledges today that India is number 1. And we don't talk about it. Our press doesn't talk about it. More so, our leaders don't talk about it. Right? Nobody wants to tell you that you're good. Everybody wants to tell you you're the most corrupt country. What will come in our press is the corruption index. Believe me, corruption exists much more in the countries which has lowest corruption. They call it something else. You know, accommodation is there in every country. The way they accommodate is different. So I do not say that corruption per se, we may have pure corruption, yes, that is there. But that is not the criteria we should be worried about. We should be talking about these kind of statistics where India is the most satisfying country for a young person to live in, and hopes and positive things like that. And let's talk about this one. This is again done by I'm sure it's a European. Because they've ranked the GDP, top 10 countries in GDP as it would be in 2050. First one is going to be China. Second one is going to be USA. Third one is India. And some European didn't like it, so he put EU together and put it there as an asterisk. Right? But if you actually come down, Japan is below us. And today, actually, Japan is 4-1. I mean, China's overtaken Japan. You would have all read that last week. China overtook Japan as economic power. That's already happened now in 2010. And I mean, actually, it's happened much sooner than what these charts are predicting. And you look at United Kingdom. They're about 1/9 our size in 2050. There's no growth in any of those countries, which we are talking about being forward. And honestly, believe me, and we have factories working in Germany, we had. I mean, just to correct, we had 2 factories in Germany, one in Sweden and one in Portugal. We have closed down the 2 German factories and the Swedish factory, and we have concentrated all our manufacturing into Portugal because the Portuguese technology is better than the German technology. It's better than the Swedish technology. I mean, really funny. We didn't believe it until we went there and saw it. Our engineers are equal and working with the Portuguese guys, and we are far better than the Swedes and the Germans in a foundry, which is unbelievable, but that's a fact. Okay, so marginally, if you looked at our, when the recession came, we had to close down the most inefficient plants. The most inefficient plants were in Germany and Sweden. And the most efficient was in Portugal. So this is quite something which has to be seen. And looking forward, I think we have a great future. And the future's there with manufacturers like you who have to believe in the systems, and we have to develop our own systems and implement them. Just like to sum up, the future belongs to us as India. We have the people, the talent, the energy, and the knowledge. And we should project a united front with no gaps that were there 500 years back when the British came. That's exactly what we have to avoid, that we do not project a cracked front to an outsider. We should train the younger generation in all the details and management skills, and we should have the self-confidence to go ahead.